In this segment, I'm going to introduce you to the CSS box model. The CSS box model treats all of the elements on your screen as a box. For example, this div called InfoForm is a box. You can't really see it, but that box surrounds the content. This is a pretty typical form that you might see on the internet, where you're asked to enter your first name, last name, and email. Let's take a quick look at the HTML that I did before we started the video. So we've got our div that I've ID'd as InfoForm. We've placed some text instructions here. Probably be better if we put these in a paragraph tag. We generally don't like to have content floating outside of a tag, so we'll fix that. Then we have our form. Inside the form itself, which ends right here on line 18, we've got a label for the first name. Here's the first name label. An input for first name, and this is the input. A label for email, an input for label, an input for last name rather, and then email, the input for email, and then our submit button right here. So there we've got our form. So now we want to make this look a little bit more like a form. So let's go ahead and put in our style tags here in the head. And inside our style tags, let's grab the ID, info form, and we'll write our rules for the entire form in here. So, for example, let's say I wanted to set the form to a background color, kind of a light gray. So we're going to use the background color rule. And let's use RGB. Let's use something like, again, close to white, but not entirely. Let's do like a 230, 230, 230. All right, and now you can actually see the box. And the box will change with the width of the browser, or the height of the browser will cause a scroll bar. This is kind of a small box, but you can see as I expand the browser to the right, the box expands. Now we also can set the width of the box manually. So let's use the width rule here, and we'll set that in pixels to 300 pixels. And now you can see no matter what we do to the actual browser, the width is constant at 300 pixels, which is what we want for this particular form. So now you can clearly see the box. Now you may notice I'm going to make this a little bit darker just so there's more contrast, because there's something I want you to see here. And notice how the P here is really close to the edge. In fact, it looks unpleasant. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some padding. Padding is the space between the edge of your box and the content. And we can add padding individually for the bottom, left, right, and top, or we can set a single padding value for all of these. I'm going to set a padding of 5 pixels. Now you may have noticed that with the 5 pixels of padding, our whole box got wider. And that's because padding adds to the width. So the width of our box is now actually 310 pixels. Now let's also put a border around our box. The border goes around the outside of the padding and can be colored separately. So just like before, we can get the bottom, the top, the left, and the right all separate. And we also can separate the style of the border, the color of the border, and the thickness of the border. I'm going to combine those because we're going to do the same border on each side. So we're going to do a border that is a single pixel thick and black. So we're going to do 1px solid black. And notice here now we've got the black border. I could change this pixel rating, let's say 15, and now we've got a really thick border. Let's go somewhere in the middle. Let's go like a border of 8. And instead of solid, let's do a dashed border. Now it kind of looks like a coupon. All right, so now we've got this kind of shaping up a little bit better. We've got our dashed border. We've got a little bit of padding here, so this looks better. And let's go ahead and inside the form, let's change the actual text to something smaller. So we're going to do font size, and let's go with like a 0.75 em. If that's too small, we can always change it back. That's a little small. Let's go with a 0.85 em. Great. So we've got our box, we've got our padding around the box, we've got our border, but we also have margin. And margin is what pulls the box away from the sides. Now, the browser has some default margin. And before I click Save and this changes, you can see it right here where my mouse is pointing. There's a default 3 to 5 pixel margin right here. I'm going to save. And since I set that margin to 0, I overrode the default style sheet, and now it's right here in the corner. But now if I set margin on the box, for example, margin top, just hitting the top, we can set that in pixels to anything we like. So let's say 10 pixels. And notice this pulls away from the edge 10 pixels. And let's say margin left 3 pixels. So now we're actually physically controlling the margin here. Now this margin would apply also if there was other divs or other content here. But now you can clearly see the margin around the box. So we've got our margin, our border, our padding, and then our interior content. Now you may be wondering though, we've got this space up here above this text, and that's not being caused by any of the CSS that we wrote. The CSS that we wrote is dealing just with the form, but what's happening here is actually this p tag also has properties in the default style sheet. So what we're going to need to do is reset the p tag to get rid of some of this space. Let me bring in another browser tool to illustrate this. So here we go. Pull this in here. So this is actually Firefox with a Firebug plugin. Firebug plugin is great for debugging code and seeing what's wrong with it. So here I've gone into their HTML view and I've selected this paragraph, and we're looking at the layout. And notice there's 13 pixels on top in the margin area and 13 pixels in the bottom of the margin area. You can even see them laid out in yellow in the window portion of the screen above. So this is giving us an illustration of our box model with our margin, border, padding, and actual content. So to defeat this margin, what I'm going to do is on the paragraph tag, I'm going to set the margin to something other than 13. So this is just the paragraph inside the info form. I don't want to affect the other paragraphs, so I'm going to use a descendant selector. So if I do this, info form, P, this will mean a paragraph whose parent is info form, or a paragraph inside the info form ID, just like this one is, which is the one we're trying to select. So remember, it's the margin top that we're trying to limit. So let's set that to 4 pixels. And did you see how this moved up and gave us a much tighter margin at the top? Let's also set the margin bottom for 4 pixels. Now watch the browser, and there we go. So now that's much tighter inside the box. So using the CSS box model and understanding it, we've greatly improved the look and feel of this form using CSS.